From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you. Here's what's coming up. K-State's Glynn Tonsor on the cattle markets. He'll comment on the prospects of the cattle flow to packers remaining current, given the COVID-19 disruptions that have developed at packing plants. And Glynn shares his latest projected returns to cattle feeding. Also today, K-State's Joel DeRouchey talks about what hog producers can do to actually slow down the pace of pig growth, buying time as the COVID interruptions in pork packing and processing hopefully are worked out in the weeks ahead. Later, Jeff Wickman with this week's 4-H segment. He'll talk with K-State's Aliah Mestrovich Seay about a new program for youth called Mindful Monday Mornings. All that and more coming up on this Agriculture Today.
For information on threatening weather, you should depend on the National Weather Service and their broadcast on NOAA Weather Radio. NOAA Weather Radio is an all-hazards radio network that provides up-to-the-minute weather information, including life-saving warnings anytime, day or night. NOAA Weather Radio also broadcasts information on man-made disasters, such as chemical spills, Amber Alerts, or other national emergencies. For the National Weather Service, I'm Bill Curtis.
You are tuned in to the K-State Radio Network and Agriculture Today. Thanks, as always, for being along with us. As the cattle markets are front and center on this Monday edition with Glynn Tonsor aboard via online chat. Glynn is a livestock economist with K-State Research and Extension, as you well know. So, Glynn, looking back last week at the trade, nothing that gets people very excited there.
No, and I always try to break down cash futures, cut out. We're going to do all that here, but there are some different signals in those respective markets for sure. Let's tackle the futures because it might be the simplest to summarize this past week. So the nearby live cattle April contract closed just below 95. That's about 50 cents higher for the week. It was all things considered a fairly calm week actually for that contract. For quick context, we're up over $11 from the quote unquote low on the April 6th, but we're down notably from about 120 on February 20th. And given that context, just to remind us all about the massive volatility day to day we've had in this complex. Flip over to feeder cattle. Nearby April contract closed just below 120. Again, up less than $1 for the week. Up from just below 105 actually on that same day, April 6th. Down from 142 February 20th. On balance, the futures market was much more quiet this past week than it has been, and certainly relative to other things in the more general economic environment. Now, let's flip over to the cash market. Of course, that's where a lot of our listeners are focused at the moment. Mm-hmm. The Fed cattle trade this past week was, I'm going to call it abnormal. There's always a discussion about, do we need more negotiated activity or not? What percentage of total trade is negotiated, so on and so forth. You know, it's noteworthy that we had multiple states that had zero negotiated trade reported by USDA this past week. Don't think that's a what percent do we need negotiated as much as it was this past week. We had an awful lot of feeling our way as we went. How many cattle are we going to be able to process? What's the positioning of those that are already locked up from past arrangements and so forth? But the one number I do have to share was there's a small volume of negotiated cattle in Nebraska that USDA reported up $1, maybe $2 up. It was reported at 111. There was a unofficial range that floated around, and USDA didn't really put this in some of the reports, but everything between $94 and 105 was floating around. Take note, the Nebraska numbers above that. Anytime you have that low of a negotiated volume printed, you're not going to have a lot to pull from in a week like this. I really think the major point to note for Fed cattle trade this past week was both yards and plants were sorting through how many cattle they can handle. I mean, I think that's front and center, biggest challenge. Flip over to the cash market for feed cattle to wrap this up. AMS called the Kansas market steady. They gave multiple lots that would be $2 or $3 lower, and a few actually are $7 higher. 2 lots for quick context, 205 head weighing 620 pounds, went for 148. And then some heavier lot, 744 head weighing 824, went for 118. So, lots of discussion this past week on, again, the interchange between feedlots and packing facilities nationwide, trying to sort through, quote unquote, how many closures do we have? And even of those that haven't closed, what operating speed do they have? That's the punchline of that. I don't want to bore us all with numbers and numbers and numbers, even though that's what economists always do. But the number of plants that are running at reduced speeds in the spirit of trying to protect the health of their workforce and keep operation is definitely, I mean, I would argue almost the entire industry, not just the few plants that have made closure announcements. There's an awful lot of plants that have put in additional protocols, and that slows some of our ability to operate. If you add on top of that some less than fantastic fed cattle offers, if you're a feedlot, it's not surprising that we had a lower volume go through this past week.
Naturally, when you see zero negotiated cash volume in 3 major states, that brings up the understandable worry about remaining current in this market.
Very much. And, we always need to be monitoring that. But in these unique, dire times, it's extra important to have a handle on those flows. A couple quick responses. For those that want a longer, detailed response, last Thursday I put up a 10-minute video webinar where I dive into that with charts and so forth. But I'm just going to put a bow around it here. Let's look at the actual operating capacity this past week as USDA reported it. The initial estimate was just over 500,000 head processed, 502. That's down from 536 the week before and down from a full 642 same week the year before. I've also made note about the amount of beef it's produced, but the percentage changes are very similar, of course. Weights are up a little bit, but not enough to change the punchline story here. Compared to the prior week, we are 6 to 7% lower in terms of number of head. And then compared to the same week last year, we're 20% lower. How does all that mesh out and how does it match with the currency, as you noted? Well, first and foremost, there's lots of anecdotal evidence and my own diving into past cattle on feed report data suggests we pulled forward some cattle in March. That bought some time, so to speak, right now. Animals are still growing. They might be in a little bit more maintenance mode than normal, but they're still out there growing, so we can't ignore this. But I do think we bought ourselves some flexibility by pulling cattle forward into March. This is an important point to interject. There's 2 major reports from USDA coming this week. On Friday is the cattle on feed report. Of course, everybody always wants to know that, but if you want an update on currency, that is going to be a very useful update. How many animals did we have on April 1st? What were the placements and marketings in March? It's going to be front and center of that discussion. And then also, while I'm talking about reports, on Wednesday, the cold storage report comes out. That's connected with this because I probably spent as much time in the last 10 days of the media talking about, are we going to run out of meat or not? How does this all fit together from a consumer availability perspective? Getting an update on our cold storage stock information, again, that comes out Wednesday, will help us round out that story.
Not to forget about the cutout trade this past week. Briefly summarize that, if you would. And there's some sliver of hope, if you will.
Yeah. So the choice cutout was $239, select was $227. That implies a choice select spread of just under $12. The 2 slivers, there's at least 2 that come to mind, I'll highlight. One is the actual choice select spread is more or less tracking what it was last year. A couple of weeks recently, it's actually more positive than it was last year. I highlight that because to some, that choice select spread is a signal of demand. And if that holds out, that's a good sign that people are still paying up for better quality beef. When we have lots of unique markets signals going on, it's always good to confirm or reaffirm that the market signals are working in that way. The second piece, and I honestly didn't write all these down this morning, but as a general statement over the last few days, 3 weeks in particular, the primals that make up those composite cutouts have very unique stories to them. So the chuck and round are up notably from the middle of March. All the other primals are down notably from that same period. That reflects the demand for ground beef that's present in all the discussions and the shift over to retail, the challenges on maintaining high demand for loin and rib products, even brisket product for that matter, that doesn't go through typical channels. The net of all that is getting lots of attention, and we need to keep understanding that. But core to it is the quasi shutdown of the restaurant channel and what that does to the demand for certain products. We talked live animals. Now we're talking whole cutout. Well, if you really want to understand the industry, we got to understand at the product level. And, boneless ribeye and 80-20 ground beef are far from the same product.
All right. And Glynn, reluctantly, we are yet compelled to take a look at your latest updates on the returns to finishing cattle, the projected feedlot returns, which we knew were going to worsen some moving into the year, but that damage is amplified by all of this.
Sure. And as a quick reminder for our listeners, this effort, I do it every month using Focus on Feedlot information, comes out between like the 10th and 12th usually each month, and presumes no hedging. And that's essential for the environment we're in right now, because anybody that had their cattle partially protected before, say, February 15th would be in a very different situation. Mm-hmm. Those comments aside, We have very negative margins predicted for the rest of calendar year 2020. Each month here is a closeout month. The worst, of course, is April and May. Those would be the animals that were the furthest along and have to be sold during, or hopefully they're on the, during the period of reopening, but the worst of the current wave, at least, of COVID here in the U.S. To give some context, the number I have up here is a loss of $490 for April closeouts. That is substantial. That is a $350 increase in negative margin compared to back where we were February 8th. So if you do a 2-month look, again, I do this monthly, compare my numbers on February 8th versus April 9th. Both April and May closeout months are down over $350 compared to where they were before. Several of the months after that were actually projected to be positive pre-COVID. That's taken off the books as of today. Now, of course, if beef demand abroad and then here domestically can rebound, a lot of our exports go to Asia. And by most reports, there's some positive signs that maybe on the health front and hopefully the economic front thereafter, things are improving and maybe they're quote unquote ahead of Europe and North America on that front. If we start opening up the economy domestically and we slowly get restaurant trade back up and we really slowly probably get business travel back up, that will be supportive of loin products and the like that you would hope would show back up. Back to my comments about different primals having very different patterns that would spill over into higher live cattle prices. We have a long ways to go on that. I'm concerned that aggregate beef demand is certainly going to be lower than it was before, simply because the macroeconomic environment is certainly weaker than it was before COVID is the central point of that. But hopefully the worst of that particular story is behind us. That's what's embedded in my hope comment. I'm not promising we go back to where we were last, say, like November on the demand front, but hopefully we get better than we were through all of March, for example.
Let's end on that upbeat note and remind folks once again to take full advantage of all of the materials that Glynn has been posting on the cattle markets, the livestock markets broadly, on agmanager.info, including that recent webinar he conducted, the recording of which is posted right there as well. Glynn, take care, and we'll catch up with you again soon. We do appreciate the input right here.
Thank you, Eric.
Glynn Tonsor, livestock economist, K-State Research and Extension, featured on this week's cattle market segment here on Agriculture Today.
Hamburgers, roast, ribs, steak, or whatever you prefer. Beef, it's what's for dinner. Kansas cattle farmers produce 7.5 million head of cattle per year. It takes about 7 tablespoons of peanut butter to get the same amount of protein in 1 serving of lean beef. Support your local Kansas farmers and ranchers. Eat beef. This message was brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
Welcome back. You're listening to Agriculture Today. Well, another perspective on what hardships COVID-19 has brought to bear on the agricultural industry, and honing in here on the hog production sector and what hog producers might think about in attempting to weather all of this as we move forward. We brought in Joel DeRouchey. Joel is a livestock specialist with K-State Research and Extension. And Joel, because you have been so deeply involved in the hog industry for so long, if you look at this from the 30,000-foot view, how do you characterize what's happening in the hog production sector right now?
Yeah, I think just the uncertainty that everybody is going through is really forefront, and uncertainty from a number of reasons. Right now, with many packing plants and processing facilities closing or going down in the amount of shifts that they're running, is really putting pressure across the entire U.S. pork supply in terms of marketing pigs in a timely manner. Now, it's very regional. So some places are worse off than others depending on the packing situation in that area. If we get to South Dakota, as example, with the Morel plant, Smithfields, and then continue to go east, it's certainly sporadic in terms of which plants have went down, which plants have cut back their hours or shifts. So again, there's that, but that has ripple effects all across areas that have plants that are still going at somewhat normal capacity. So there's uncertainty of making sure that we have market access. With this, as well as is the change in market price. This has been well documented. Glynn Tonsor and our Ag Econ group has done a tremendous job of getting information out. And I'd encourage anybody who hasn't seen some of the market price changes across species, go to Ag Manager Info. There they characterize the changes from the beginning of the COVID situation back in January through current times. And as an example, pork prices on our futures market and currently are approximately 40% lower than what we were previously. And really the cash market right now is extremely low, depending where you're at across the Midwest. And really what this translates into is marketing challenges, but also the sheer loss of dollars on these pigs that are being marketed if no risk management was put in place and people are on the open market. So we're looking at now, you can do different projections. But for the rest of the year, if we just use future prices for feed inputs and then the market price, we're looking at somewhere between a $35 and $40 loss per pig for the rest of this calendar year.
This is a rugged road. Before we talk of what producers can do in the management vein to stay afloat amidst all of this, Joel, market access for Kansas producers, has it been impeded such as it has at other places, as you mentioned, in the area surrounding South Dakota and the like? But how are we faring here in that respect?
For the most part, as we visit with producers, we're fairly current. A number of our producers utilize harvest facilities in St. Joe, Missouri, Crete, Nebraska, some to Guyman, Oklahoma. And in those, we've been able to maintain to be relatively constant at this point. What many producers as well have done because of market price, they started about over a month ago, started to pull ahead marketings. What I mean there is they've dropped their average. If they were at 280 pounds on an average, they reduced it to 270 pounds. Partly that's an economic decision because when pig price goes lower, those last pounds are not as valuable. But also what that did is it creates a buffer. If a marketing disruption comes in place, their inventory of market pigs is a little lighter. So you have room in those barns to have some additional days if your marketings have been disrupted. One of the big challenges that we have to understand for many of our pork producers is they're on a fixed time basis. So sows are farrowing, pigs are being weaned, pigs are in the nurseries next, and they need to go to a finisher because everything's on a time schedule. And when we get these disruptions where we can't empty the marketing barns or the finishing barns of those pigs going to market, that creates a bottleneck all the way back. And so by building in some extra time, that's allowed producers to have a little flexibility. But the vast majority of our medium and large scale producers do not have much time flexibility, and nor can you just go find a new finishing barn to put them in because all good barns are generally in use all the time. So that adds to this uncertainty. But producers have done a good job of mostly marketing ahead, trying to anticipate some of these disruptions here in Kansas.
In the production sense, Joel, then can producers actually do something practically to put it this way, slow down the pace of production and buy some of that time that's just not inherently built in?
Yes, and we've been working with a number of producers, in fact, with this. There's a couple nutritional things we can do, and we're kind of targeting that last diet, so really the last 50 to 70 pounds for a lot of producers. We can do different diet strategies in terms of making sure that we remove any feed additives that may help improve growth, such as additional copper, and there's other medium-chain fatty acid. There's other products that some producers use, so we've removed those because we don't want to promote extra growth. We also go to a low-energy diet, so if there was any added fat that increases energy, we've removed that because we do not want that added growth at this point. And that also adds cost when we do that because fat's more expensive than our other grains and soybean meal as example. We also can reduce the amount of soybean meal or the amount of amino acids in that last diet. We can do that and decrease feed cost as well as at that same time decrease growth about 10% by taking it down. We still maintain in almost all cases some level of soybean meal in that last diet, but then we keep the vitamins and mineral levels constant as well so we don't cause any unintended consequences because pigs, like all livestock, need their daily amounts of vitamins and trace minerals. Other things that we can do is in the barn from a management standpoint, and most producers have implemented these, is you can we have certain ventilation rates in barns for the air quality standpoint. What we can actually do is decrease the ventilation slightly to more of the minimum ventilation which still clears the barn out of odor of gases, keeps the barn dry inside, but it'll warm the barn up a little bit. And this time of year, basically it induces that kind of that first heat wave that we would generally get in May and June. We can actually induce that now. And basically as we heat the barns, their feed intake goes down, so they grow slower. So it's still a environment that's comfortable, but the barns just simply warm up a little bit, maybe into the mid 80s instead of keeping it in the mid 70s as example. We also can reduce some of the feeder adjustments. So basically we offer pigs full access of feed, and we can adjust the feeder gate up and down to allow more or less feeder into the trough that they're eating from. We can reduce that gate down, so we still offer pigs full access of feed, but there's just less available. So they have to work that feeder a little bit more. So where they're still getting what they need, they just slow down because instead of consuming a big buffet, they're consuming more of a moderate level of a buffet, the way to think about it.
And all of this can be done without compromising the end product, it would sound.
Absolutely. So none of these would compromise meat quality, pork safety, the welfare of the pigs. It's just really altering some of the management, moving them from the ideal best conditions for growth to a level that reduces their growth, but certainly does not put them in any sort of welfare or immune compromise, any of those sort of things that would impact the health and the quality of meat that those pigs produce.
And it would make sense, too, Joel, that managing, economically speaking, the inputs to gain any efficiencies possible would be applicable here, too.
Yes, and one of the things, because of the entire ag community is faced the downward trend of prices, the grains have went down in price as well. Soybean meal actually went up, and this gets into distillers' grains. Many ethanol plants have closed across the U.S. or have cut back their production, so the price of distiller grains has went up dramatically. And in Kansas, as example, if a swine producer was using some distillers, it's simply just too expensive, and the cattle industry is experiencing this as well. Also, soybean meal went up, but it's actually come down the last 2 weeks in price. And so based on a total feed cost basis, depending where a producer's at, somewhere between $5 to $9 a pig and less feed cost is realized right now compared to if we'd go back a couple months. When producers are currently losing $30 to $40 a pig, that has a significant impact because they are losing less, which is a benefit, but the revenue side is what's really the hindering now of being able to break even or make money in the industry.
Parting thought here, these are trying times. There's no possible argument against that for hog producers, for the livestock sector. Your message to producers is to be as creative and innovative as possible. That's what this is about, Joel.
Well, it is. And again, here in Extension at K-State, we're always here to visit with any swine producer to help them in that decision process. Their veterinarians are long trusted advisors that are involved in a lot of these decisions as well. Continue to focus on the daily management things that have always made our producers successful. We cannot lose sight of those.
Well, that valuable input is appreciated. Joel, many thanks for your time right here.
Thank you, Eric, for all you're doing.
That's Joel DeRouchey, livestock specialist, K-State Research and Extension, on potential adjustments that hog producers can make to keep their operations rolling amid the troubles brought on by the COVID-19 situation. And we'll be back with more. You're listening to Agriculture Today.
Burning prairie grass is essential for Flint Hills ranchers. Following grazing and burning best practices can ensure that the prairie remains intact while not smoking out downwind neighbors. The Kansas Flint Hills Smoke Management Plan helps guide prescribed burning on prairie land. To learn more, visit www.ksfire.org. Again, that's www.ksfire.org.
Coming to you from the campus of Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here. Now today's agricultural news headlines, courtesy in part of DTN. And the lead story, of course, responding to the economic impact on agriculture brought on by the coronavirus pandemic. The Trump administration will provide an initial aid package of roughly $16 billion in direct payments to producers and another $3 billion in food purchases. USDA Secretary Sonny Perdue announced the details of the coronavirus food assistance program on Friday at the nightly White House press briefing with President Trump. Perdue said the initial aid package comes largely from the $9.5 billion in funds from the stimulus bill last month, as well as $6.5 billion from the Commodity Credit Corporation and other funding sources. Now, further details released by Senator John Hoeven of North Dakota, the chairman of the Senate Agriculture Appropriations Committee, highlight the program will provide $9.6 billion in direct aid to livestock producers, $3.9 billion for commodity crop producers, $2.1 billion for fruit and vegetable growers, and another $500 million for farmers who grow various niche products. Hoeven's news release stated that farmers will receive one payment based on a formula detailing price losses from January the 1st to April the 15th and then paid on 85% of that price loss. Commodities eligible for the program must reflect at least a 5% price decline within that time frame. A second part of the formula involves projection of potential losses from April the 15th through mid-October, and producers will be paid based on 30% of those expected market losses. Also, payments will be limited to $125,000 for each commodity, with a $250,000 payment cap on an individual or entity. Perdue indicated there may not be a means test for farmer eligibility, saying, quoting here, "This program is open to farmers and ranchers regardless of size if they have suffered a loss." And the Secretary said that the USDA will begin sign-up in early May. Payments will start to be delivered later in May or in early June.
USDA will implement this program as quickly, effectively, and efficiently as we can to provide as direct, quick, immediate financial relief to our farmers and ranchers, but also allow for the purchase and distribution of our agricultural surplus to help our fellow Americans in need.
Now, left out of the aid package was any aid for the struggling ethanol industry. The Renewable Fuels Association said the industry and the 350,000 workers supported by the biofuels industry were left behind. The roughly half of ethanol capacity has gone offline the past couple of months due to the collapse in oil prices and driving demand nationally. Perdue acknowledged huge challenges in the biofuels industry, but saying this, quoting here, "Frankly, at this point, there's just not enough money to go around. The demand from all the sectors was just more than we could accommodate at this time." Now, the USDA will also spend $3 billion in fresh produce, dairy, and meat products to be distributed to Americans in need through the food bank networks, as well as other community and faith-based organizations, saying that the restaurant and institution shutdown has disrupted the supply chain. Perdue said the USDA will put those regional and local private food distributors to work by using monthly purchases of $100 million each in dairy, product, and meat products, and package those products in boxes for delivery to food banks. Another $14 billion in funds from the Commodity Credit Corporation will become available near the end of June, and Perdue indicated those funds would also likely be needed for direct aid. Now, dairy farmers had asked the USDA to consider some supply management provisions, such as having producers scale back production, as well as reopening the dairy margin coverage program. Perdue said supply management would be a longer discussion. It would be more costly to implement. He also said that the dairy margin coverage is an insurance program, and the USDA had aggressively tried to get many dairy producers to sign up for that last year. Allowing farmers to sign up now, he says, would be counter to getting them to focus on risk management tools. The Secretary is saying we literally begged people to sign up for that last year. And Perdue said in a teleconference with reporters he was thanking farmers, ranchers, and everyone working in the food system.
Thank you to all of our food supply chain, but it begins with the farmers who are out there, even now, putting the seed in the ground and growing those crops with not knowing what's going to happen, so that we can have enough to eat in the fall. we're so grateful for what all of you do and what the folks across the entire food chain do day in and day out to assure our American families are fed.
Now, a range of farm and ranch groups over the weekend said the $19 billion program that the Secretary announced last Friday was an important first step, but not enough to stabilize their sectors. National Cattlemen's Beef Association President Marty Smith, a Florida cattle producer, said, quoting here, while the relief funds that have been allocated to USDA by Congress represent a start to stabilizing the industry, there is much more work to be done to protect the cattle producers who are an essential component of agriculture and the anchor for rural America, in his words. National Milk Producers Federation President and CEO Jim Mulhern also expressed appreciation to the Secretary for including dairy in the disaster assistance package, but said more will be needed to stem the steep losses in the dairy sector. Quoting him, dairy's fortunes have been especially grim, given the perishability of our product, its daily harvest, and the fact that the virtual shutdown of the food service market has wiped out demand by more than one-third of the overall product demand. And National Pork Producers Council President Howard Roth noted that the package includes payment limitations, again, of $125,000 per commodity and $250,000 per individual. Roth said that, quoting him, that they fear the lifeline so desperately needed will fall short of what is truly needed. He went on to say while the direct payments to hog producers will offset some losses for farmers, they are not sufficient to sustain the varied market participants, including those who own hogs, as well as thousands of contract growers who care for pigs. All the participants have made sizable investments in a U.S. pork production system that is the envy of the world. He said many generational family farms will go bankrupt without immediate financial aid. And meantime, USDA officials continue to insist that there are no shortages of food in the country. Despite shoppers seeing empty store shelves and grocery stores, they said that there are sufficient quantities not only to feed the country, but maintain our robust exports, even in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic. That according to USDA Chief Economist Rob Johansson. That's a look at today's agricultural news headlines. You're listening to Agriculture Today.
Social distancing slows the spread of coronavirus, so if you have a fever, dry cough, and shortness of breath, call your healthcare provider before going in. More info at coronavirus.gov. Let's all do our part, because we're all #AloneTogether. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Welcome back, and thanks for joining us on Agriculture Today. Along with Eric Atkinson, I'm Jeff Wickman. Spurred by a K-State research and extension project aimed at reducing stress in rural Kansas, Kansas 4-H Extension Communications Specialist Aliah Mestrovich Seay is developing a program centered around social-emotional learning. That's a process of dealing with life's tough moments by developing greater self-awareness, self-control, and interpersonal skills. The Mindful Monday Mornings program will be using the KSRE Facebook page and KSRE Twitter page to promote and feature a rotating schedule of focus areas. The first program, April 27th, will be Mindful Moments for All Ages. A soft launch of the program was held earlier today to introduce the program to extension agents and preview the upcoming schedule.
Yes, we are going to begin working on mindfulness activities that will take place over the next 3 months, every Monday at 10 a.m., and you can tune in to our KSRE Facebook page.
So walk me through this. How does this work?
Well, there will be a series of 3-minute videos that will be posted on the KSRE Facebook page that will have links to other mindfulness activities and resources, and there's something for everyone. So we'll have 1 week that focuses on pre-K, another week that focuses on 4-H youth development aged youth, and then also a week for adults and the whole family. We'll end each month with an interview from an expert that is talking about mindfulness.
Go into a little bit more detail when we talk about mindfulness. What are we trying to accomplish?
We're really trying to find practical ways to reduce stress during the day so that we can make sure that we are communicating effectively and actually feeling healthy during a challenging and stressful time.
So walk me through this in terms of if you were maybe someone who is pre-K, what would their exercise look like?
These videos are designated or focusing on parents that are at home with their children right now, and even professionals that can find things around the house, resources that are easy to use, that they can actually work with their child that is, 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, to be able to model what is important during this time, have a sense of togetherness, and also help children learn how to deal with stress and talk about their feelings. We are trying to have people from those age groups actually participate in these videos. These videos are actually being done just out of the home via Zoom or even videos on our phone. And the KSRE marketing team is helping us and kind of guiding us through this. So where the 4-H age youth videos are concerned, we will have 4-H youth and even 4-H volunteers modeling different mindfulness curricula that are associated with 4-H youth development.
And where are they getting all of their information from?
A variety of research-based curricula. We have one curricula we're using called GEM, that is a 4-H curriculum that's called Get Experience in Mindfulness, so the acronym is GEM. We also have a lot of different curricula that can just be found online related to mindfulness and reducing anxiety and stress that are easily accessible. And then we also have experts and community members. We're interviewing K-State alum. We have a supervisor from Pawnee Mental Health that has agreed to be interviewed and talk about mindfulness and trauma and how mindfulness practices actually help reduce trauma during a traumatic incident like a pandemic. So, resources are coming from a variety of areas. And, one theme that I am hearing from experts and that I am witnessing as I have the privilege of coordinating this program is really being intentional about lowering our expectations that what we are used to doing is not what we are able to do right now. We have to kind of transform and reframe the way we are doing life, doing work, to make this work and to be healthy. Because without our health, without our mental and physical health, there's not much we can get done.
And getting 4-H youth involved with this is an excellent idea because they're probably looking for some things to do and a way to share what they know.
Yes, it's really been fun working with youth and volunteers on this project. And, youth are so coachable, and we're continuing to do videos and to do activities as we go through this entire mindfulness series. We're kind of learning by doing and learning as we go.
And you'll have a little bit of something for everybody with all of the different age groups that you're focusing on.
Yeah, so we decided to have different segments based on different weeks within the month because we really wanted to span all of human development, not just pre-K, not just 4-H youth, not just adults, but everyone, so that everybody can be able to use these different mindfulness techniques as a resource and feel like they're working and share them with others.
There is a lot that goes into this, and you've got it kind of mapped out. Like you said, you've got this for the next 3 months. You're going to start on April 27th with Mindful Moments for all ages, and then the following Monday you'll do pre-K. The next Monday, you'll do 10 plus, and then on May 18th, you'll hit adults and then kind of start the cycle over again?
Yes, and we'll end the month with a centered interview, a focused interview with an expert that will be expanding upon these concepts. And yes, it won't just be for youth ages 10 and over, but it will be for all youth that are within that 4-H age range. So one thing we're finding is if we teach a 10-year-old or an 11-year-old mindfulness techniques, they can go back and teach their younger siblings that are 7, 8, or 9 how to do some of these things. And it really becomes very age appropriate as they interact with each other. So yes, there will be a segment each month on youth development, positive youth development, and mindfulness as well.
So one of the things you're wanting the agents to do right now is to spread the word and let people know about this series?
Yes, that would be great. The more people know, the better, and the more that we can share these techniques specific to our extension community across the state of Kansas, the better off we'll be.
And again, this is all going to be taking place on Facebook?
Yes, it will be posted on the KSRE Facebook page with links to other resources, and there is a potential development also with like a web page that will be developed at a later date that will also have all of those videos archived so people can go and look at them as they come up.
Again, this series is something that will be of interest to the entire family and something that you would encourage them to take a look at and find out the things that work for them.
Yes, and we also encourage them to reach out with other questions, and we really want this to be interactive. That's why we started with a social media launch on Facebook, because we want to hear from people. We want to hear what works for them. We want to hear what they want more of. So we're really hoping to develop a sense of community through this and just have people try it, see what works and what they like and what they want more of. That's what we're hoping for.
That's Kansas 4-H Extension Communication Specialist Aliah Mestrovich Seay. To learn more about the Mindful Monday Mornings program, visit the KSRE Facebook page. For information about Kansas 4-H, go to kansas4h.org. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. For Eric Atkinson, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.